Okay, that's good.
Okay. So thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. And what I'm going to do today is just talk a little bit about the work that I do here at LaSalle. I'm just going to start off telling you a little bit about myself and then why I think that it's important to try to better understand factors that contribute to eating and weight-related difficulties, and then talk a little about what some of those factors may be, and then how we can actually promote change. And then I'll connect that directly to what it is that we're doing here at LaSalle. And so I know you've been talking, have you been talking about exploring nutrition?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
a little bit,
okay. So this connects to the broader initiative of exploring nutrition, I think, in some pretty obvious ways. One is that what I'll be talking about is related to, again, factors that contribute to unhealthy eating patterns or weight difficulties, but more explicitly, what it is that we're doing here at LaSalle to try to address some of those things. So I am a faculty member in the Department of Psychology. I teach primarily in the doctoral program. So the psychology department has a doctoral program where we train individuals who are getting their what's called a PsyD in psychology, and it's basically a clinical degree in psychology. So I teach mostly in that program, and as part of my responsibilities, I supervise students in a clinic that I'll talk about later. And as part of that clinic, there's a larger clinic here at LaSalle, but I supervise a smaller part of that clinic where we see people who are coming with problems related to eating patterns or weight difficulties, such as obesity. And so that's how the work that I do is directly connected to this particular topic. And then my other smaller responsibility is I also teach a couple of courses in the undergraduate psychology department. I'm a clinical health psychologist, and I've been working or studying or doing things related to obesity and disordered eating for about 15 years. And over time, I've really come to appreciate the importance of offering services to people who are really at need, which is one of the things that I really like about what we can do here at LaSalle. Because of our location, we can provide these services to people who might not otherwise be able to afford them. So some of this may be a repeat for you, but perhaps it isn't. Hopefully it isn't. But this is just some statistics. I think it's a really nice way of depicting why we might have some concerns about weight or obesity in the United States. In fact, recently obesity was identified by the American Medical Association as a medical condition, really bringing even further attention to the importance of recognizing and understanding factors that contribute to the high rates of obesity. So what you can see here is that from the 1990s to 2010, and now obviously these data are now 5 years old, so you can imagine that the colors have gotten, the map is probably a little bit redder and darker than even it is here. But you can see how we went from having no data in some places, but less than 10%, up to about 20% of individuals with what is called a BMI, or a body mass index, of greater than or equal to 30. So a body mass index is basically a ratio between your height and your weight. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, you've probably heard BMI. Has anyone not heard of BMI? Okay, so you're all familiar with the term. Okay, so approximately 30 pounds overweight for an individual who's 5 feet 4 inches tall. That would be considered a BMI of greater than or equal to 30. And what you see here is that between 1990 and 2010, you see the rates of obesity drastically increasing, suggesting that this is something that we should pay closer attention to, and that we really need to provide services to people both in terms of prevention as well as treatment. There are lots of factors that contribute, that are hypothesized to contribute to these increased rates. Anyone have any thoughts on what you think could be things that have contributed, maybe based on what you've heard or what you've read? Yes?
I mean, fast food places have been around for some time in America, so maybe
Just like more kids are using technology and like Xbox Live and stuff as opposed to playing outside, because I'm not sure what else.
Yep. Yes. So decreases in physical activity and concomitant increases in physical inactivity absolutely have contributed, for sure. Yes.
And also at schools, they've like cut recess and gym class, so I'm sure that plays a role.
So again, that decrease in physical activity. Were you going to say something? No. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I was going to say, lack of intelligence about it. I mean, not everybody's as knowledgeable as some people when it comes to the right food to eat, and some people also, children don't really have a decision in the matter, and their parents are calling the shots. So
so miseducation, and there's also, we know that especially for childhood obesity, that parental behaviors play a really important role. And so for interventions that target childhood obesity, we know that actually incorporating parents makes those interventions more effective. So absolutely, education is important. Yes?
I was going to say, does I guess the economy play a role in any part? Because the time period that you're looking at, I guess the economy was a little bit better than, say, the current time period.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can think about the cost, relatively the cost of healthier foods versus unhealthy foods. And while fast food has always been available, certainly there has been a proliferation of fast food and a proliferation of unhealthy food. And so that combined with perhaps decrease or increased problems with the economy certainly has contributed to it. Yes?
Inaccessibility to healthy foods, because I know in some neighborhoods they only have or are fast food restaurants.
Absolutely.
They might have just one supermarket.
Yes. So accessibility to healthy foods, otherwise known as food deserts. Have you heard of the term food deserts? So potentially this area could have been considered a food desert, especially before the major grocery store was introduced here a little while ago. So people have much less access to those healthy foods, and maybe they don't have transportation, so it makes it incredibly difficult to purchase healthy foods. Good. Yeah, so those are a lot of the factors that are believed to contribute to this increase in prevalence rates. So I think there's a really nice expression that the Rudd Center uses. They're now actually located at the University of Connecticut, and I have a slide at the end that posted a couple of resources, and their link is listed on there. But what they talk about is this relationship between nature and nurture. And they talk about how for obesity, genetics load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. And so what this really says is that there's this connection between a genetic or a biological predisposition to having weight difficulties. And then a lot of these environmental factors are what's going to make it even more difficult for a person to have a healthy weight. So if a person has a family history of obesity, for example, they themselves may have a higher risk of developing weight difficulties. That, coupled with living in a food desert, living in an environment where they have very little access to healthy foods, perhaps they can't afford the healthier foods, they don't have the transportation to get to those places, can make it even more problematic. Yes?
Now, I have a question. It's kind of complicated. I don't really know how I want to ask it, but like, you say genetics, can cause, obesity in people, which has obviously been, not you, Dave, it's obviously proven true. But like, do you think, seriously, do you think that it's more, physically or mentally, more physical or mental genetics that are the
Great question. Yeah. So I think there's no. So it's just like so many other things. It's not that simple. So the first thing actually that I want to clarify is that genetics do not cause obesity. So you may have a greater risk of developing obesity, but there are very few situations where you have a specific gene, and if you have that gene, then you check it, and then you say, okay, you're definitely going to develop obesity. So that's one thing to just be mindful of. But I think there's definitely a biological predisposition in terms of weight regulation. So there's some physiological patterns going on. And there are certain psychological factors that are also associated with greater risk of developing obesity. So I think it might be both. And a person can also develop obesity with no family history of obesity. So it's possible to not have that genetic predisposition as well. So it's not really that simple of an equation. But I think what this does, what this communicates, is that for a very long time, people put a lot of blame on the individual. If an individual walks around and makes certain decisions, maybe other people might start to make judgments like, oh, well, they have weight difficulties because of their specific behaviors or because of their specific choices. And what we know is that it's not as simple as that. And I think that's why this is so helpful, because it focuses not just on genetics, but also on the incredible role that the environment